I was driving through the desolate stretches of New Mexico, headed to meet my old college roommate. He'd just graduated from medical school, and a few of us from the old days were going to reunite. It had been 5 long years since we last saw each other, and I was eager for the nostalgia trip. I started late, wanting to avoid the sun's piercing rays and hoping to reach my destination by early morning. A night drive didn't seem so bad. After all, I'd pulled all-nighters plenty of times back in college. But now things were different. Adult life had dulled my endurance, and I found myself nodding off at the wheel. The car jerked violently as I veered off course, startling me awake. Overcorrecting, I skidded off the road, the tires crunching through the dry, cracked earth. Then came a sickening sound, metal scraping against something hard. I pulled the car to a stop, heart pounding in the silence of the vast, empty desert. Too tired to assess the damage, I decided to sleep in the car and figure things out in the morning. I woke up to a knock on the window. At first, I couldn't process the sound. Groggy and disoriented, I froze. This stretch of road was abandoned, miles from any town. There shouldn't be anyone out here at this hour. Panic surged through me, tightening my throat. I lay motionless, forcing myself to breathe quietly, trying to convince myself it was just a cop, maybe ... I dared to look up. Through the darkness, something moved outside. Then, without warning, I was blinded by a harsh light, accompanied by muffled cursing from beyond the window. The light shifted, revealing the source, a man with a scruffy beard, his face barely illuminated by the flashlight he held. His eyes gleamed in the dim glow. "Need some help?" he rasped, his voice low and gravelly. Turns out, he was a tow truck driver. He offered me a ride, towing my car behind us, claiming I'd probably damaged the wheel when I swerved. He said he'd have it fixed by the next day and took me to a small town nearby. The place seemed frozen in time, the kind of place where nothing ever changed and no one ever left. He set me up in a dingy hotel, said I could stay the night for free. The room was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of dust and damp wood, but I didn't care. I was too tired to be picky. Before bed, I figured I'd do a bit of reading, something to calm my nerves. I dug through my bag for my glasses when my pen slipped from my hand, rolling under the bed. Groaning, I knelt down to retrieve it. As my hand swept across the cold floor, it brushed against something else, a small, leather-bound book. Curious, I pulled it out. The journal was old, the leather cracked and worn from years of use. I flipped through the pages, most of them blank, but a few had entries scrawled in a frantic hand. I felt an odd, unsettling sensation as I began to read, August 15th, 2017. So we set out on the road trip today. The plan was to meet the guys north of Albuquerque at Pete's place, then carpool to Los Angeles. But of course, I didn't check the engine light, and now I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere. It's getting late, and I haven't seen another car for hours. My phone barely has any signal, and I'm starting to worry. Night is falling, and I'm alone. I was just about to give up and sleep in the backseat when I saw headlights in the distance. I grabbed my flashlight, hoping whoever it was would stop and not run me over. The car flashed its high beams at me before pulling over ahead. It was a tow truck, thankfully. The driver was this massive guy with a beard that almost reached his chest. I told him about my car, and he offered me a lift back to town. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized something. The description of the tow truck driver, it was too familiar. My blood ran cold as I read on, but something felt off. As we drove, he kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes sharp and predatory. The road seemed to stretch forever, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. I asked him where we were going, but he just chuckled. It wasn't until we passed the same crooked tree for the third time that I realized we were driving in circles. I stopped reading, my hands trembling. My skin prickled with an overwhelming sense of dread. Slowly, I looked around the small, dim room. Everything was too quiet. The air felt heavy, thick with something unspoken. I tried to push the journal away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me. And then, from outside, I heard the distant hum of an engine revving, getting closer. He worked silently, hooking my car up to the tow truck while I sat in the passenger seat, unease settling deep in my bones. Once he finished, he climbed back in, and the engine roared to life, pulling us onto the dark, winding road. "Not much around here, huh?" I ventured, breaking the heavy silence. "Nah, just a small community, maybe a few hundred of us," he replied with a gravelly chuckle. "We've got a little inn, though. You'll have to stay there tonight. I don't have room at my place. Don't worry about paying. I'll make sure Jimmy gets you a room, and I'll check on your car in the morning." "Thanks so much, man." "That would be a huge help," I said, trailing off as the realization hit me. I hadn't even asked for his name. "Frank," he said, extending a massive calloused hand off the wheel to shake mine. "No need to thank me. Just doing my job as an upstanding citizen." August 16th, 2017. Frank had started working on my car that morning. A few hours later, I checked in with him, but he said it would probably take until the next day. I spent the day wandering the tiny town, but there wasn't much to see. Just the usual post office, general store, a doctor's office, and a barber shop. I completed my tour in under an hour. Later, Frank invited me over for dinner to make up for the delay. His wife, Michelle, was an incredible cook. I hadn't eaten like that in ages, not since I moved away from my parents. I lingered for a couple of hours, enjoying their company and helping clean up afterward. When I got back to the inn, I finally thought to call Pete. I was surprised I had gone the entire day without contacting him. I must have gotten closer to a cell tower because I finally had a single bar. "Hey Pete, it's me," I said when he picked up. "Oh dude, we were getting worried. You were supposed to be here last night. Where are you?" "Yeah, sorry, my car broke down. I'm on the 56 and, I paused, realizing Frank hadn't told me the name of this place. "I actually don't know the name of the place," I admitted. "It wasn't on my GPS. Some tow truck guy gave me a ride here. I'm staying at a hotel until he gets my car fixed." The line crackled and faded into static, then went silent. I stared at my phone, bewildered. The call had ended, and the single bar I'd had was gone. I rubbed my eyes, tossing the phone under the nightstand, too exhausted to try calling back. I'd reach him in the morning. August 17th, 2017. I woke up feeling dizzy, realizing I'd slept much later than I intended. As I blinked at the morning light filtering through the grimy curtains, I noticed a missed call from Pete on my phone. I tried calling him back, but the signal was dead again. I wasn't too worried. Frank should have my car fixed by now, so I'd see Pete by tonight. But as I headed downstairs, I felt a strange unease creep over me. The inn seemed different, like something out of a twisted dream. I stepped into the lobby and nearly froze. The place looked like it was stuck in the past 20 years behind, at least. Jimmy was wearing a costume, and there were men dressed as cowboys wandering around, laughing and tipping their hats like it was some sort of bizarre old-timey festival. What the hell was going on? Had they drugged me? I was going to find Frank and demand my car, so I could get the hell out of there. But as I stormed out the door, Frank was nowhere to be found. I checked the garage. It was empty. My car vanished into thin air. A few old-timers sat on the porch of a nearby farmhouse, and when I asked about Frank, one man merely shrugged, eyes glazed over as if he were lost in some far-off thought. "Where's Frank?" I demanded, frustration bubbling over. "Don't know," he muttered ... "Where is he?" I shouted, but the man just stared at me, unfazed. He warned me to leave, saying he'd call the sheriff if I didn't. I pushed him back into his chair and stormed off, heart racing. Nothing about this place made sense anymore. The buildings were wrong. The streets twisted in ways I couldn't comprehend. Even the inn had changed. I searched for my room, but there was no window where it should have been. I stood there, confusion gnawing at me, as everyone on the street turned to stare, their whispers slithering around me like dark shadows. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up, and the grip of fear tightened around my throat. Something sinister was afoot in this town, and I needed to escape before it swallowed me whole. They all act like they don't know who I am, treating me like I'm the crazy man on the street. It's as if they think I'm too dim-witted to see through their charade. But I won't let them get to me. August 18th, 2017. They've done it again. They moved me in my sleep again. When I woke up this time, everything looked like the early 1940s. They even plastered recruitment posters everywhere, the kind that make your stomach churn. There's no way this is some petty prank pulled by a couple of cops trying to mess with passing travelers. This has to be some twisted reality show, a sick game Pete cooked up to get on TV for the big reveal. I descended the stairs and saw Jimmy, who wished me a cheerful good morning. I shook my head and walked right past him, my mind racing. Stepping outside the inn, I spotted a middle-aged woman sitting on the porch, sobbing and calling out for her son. I glared at her, disgust twisting my gut, and she stood up to slap me before stumbling away in tears. Shock coursed through me. Did they really let one of their actors go that far? I decided to play it cool, biding my time until I could turn the tables on them. That would show Pete. As I wandered down the street, I noticed a crowd gathering around an old electronics store. Intrigued, I made my way over, curiosity piqued. The store had a vintage radio playing by the door, crackling with static until the announcer's voice broke through. "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States," the announcer spoke in a hurried, hushed tone. Suddenly, President Roosevelt's voice filled the air. "My fellow Americans, Washington's birthday is the most appropriate occasion for us to talk with each other about things as they are today and things as we know they shall be in the future." I couldn't believe it. They had actually gone through the trouble of playing one of the fireside chats through that old radio. The history buff in me perked up, excitement coursing through my veins as I absorbed the moment. I stayed, listening intently, despite the curious glances from the crowd as they began to disperse. Then, something caught my eye, a figure peeking out from around the corner of a building down the street. It was too far away for a clear look, but I figured one of the crew members had slipped up and let me catch a glimpse of them. I started walking over, but by the time I reached the spot, the figure had vanished. I scanned the dirt road for footprints, but there was nothing. Determined to escape this madness, I resolved to walk out of town. Maybe if I got far enough, they'd drop this twisted game. August 19th, 2017. The last thing I remember is stepping into the vast desert, the town receding into the distance. I wondered when they would come to retrieve me, but then I woke up in the same room again. My mind raced in disbelief. How were they doing this to me? I laughed nervously, the sound echoing hollowly in the empty room. This was getting absurd. I needed to figure this out. They couldn't keep me here illegally. I had rights, I thought. But as the panic began to sink in, I realized I might have made a grave mistake. I no longer believed this was a reality show. I didn't understand what was happening at all. Suddenly, there were banging sounds on my door, and I could hear commotion outside. Were the police really coming to break down the door? I was getting ahead of myself, spiraling deeper into confusion. When I finally left the hotel, I saw another figure watching me from further down the street, peering out from the side of a building, just like the last one. If I could get to them, I could tell them I wanted out, that I wasn't obligated to be part of this twisted game. I sprinted toward the figure, heart racing, adrenaline surging through me. But as I closed in, the figure vanished behind the wall, slipping away like a phantom. I pushed myself to run faster, desperate not to let it escape. I could feel the weight of the town pressing down on me, the sinister undertones of their laughter echoing in my mind as I chased the shadows that taunted me. I turned the corner and found myself in a shadowy alleyway, utterly empty except for a rusty dumpster, some trash cans, and a giant duck and cover poster peeling off the wall. I stepped into the darkness, waiting for the man to emerge. There had to be a hidden panel or something, some way for the crew to scurry about unseen, but I couldn't find anything. Frustrated, I kicked the wall, pain shooting through my foot, and I cursed aloud. Suddenly, a clatter made me spin around. One of the trash cans had toppled over. My heart raced as a dark figure tumbled out, landing motionless on the ground. For a few seconds, it lay there, still as death, before it began to twist upwards. I heard the sickening sound of bones cracking as it unfurled itself from its contorted position. Panic surged through me, and I pressed my back against the cold, unforgiving brick of the wall. The figure turned to face me, its smooth, obsidian body revealing nothing as it began to glide forward. I heard a scratching noise above, and when I looked up, another creature was descending the wall toward me. Overwhelmed by terror, I charged forward, shoving the standing figure to the ground, and bolted out of the alley, screaming. I sprinted down Main Street and crashed into a crowd gathered outside a television store. I stumbled, knocking a few people over as they shouted in confusion. One man grabbed me, pinning me against the wall of the store. "Get off me!" I screamed, struggling against his grip. "Those freaks are after me, just let me go." I pointed down the street, desperate for someone to help. "Go find an officer." The man barked, tightening his hold on my shirt. A skinny kid broke from the group, racing in the opposite direction. I kicked at the man, but he was twice my size. In a last-ditch effort, I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, turning on the flashlight and shining it in his eyes. He recoiled, releasing me as he tried to shield his face from the light. I swung at him, landing a punch squarely on his jaw. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some screaming that I had a weapon. I dashed away, sprinting toward the hotel, heart pounding as a few of the braver souls followed close behind. Now I'm trapped here, hearing the creaking hinges and cracking wood of the door as they try to get in. I can't help but wonder what they'll think when they see what this room looks like. What will they do to me? Entry 6. It's been a while since I last wrote. I've lost track of time. They didn't throw me in jail, but they sent me somewhere for help. The doctors and nurses were kind, taking care of me as if I were fragile glass. I didn't think I was crazy, but then again, nothing seemed to change. Was it all just in my head? Hysteria from the negativity bombarding the world through the news all day? At first, there were scratching sounds at my window, day and night, driving me to the edge of madness. I even thought I saw the staff morphing into those dark figures, lurking in the corners of my vision, but they vanished after a few months. I think the doctors helped with that. They helped with a lot. Now as I read what I've written, my mind feels clearer. Everything seems so absurd. I know I didn't write most of this. I see now that none of it really happened. Thankfully, the doctors were optimistic enough to arrange for my release, and Jimmy was kind enough to let me stay in the same room as before, free of charge. All I have to do is take my pills and work on becoming a better person, an upstanding citizen, just like Dr. Frank told me to be. I should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day of getting my life back together. Entry 7. Something's terribly wrong. I can't trust my senses anymore. This morning, I woke up and everything seemed fine. But as I looked around, the feeling in my gut tightened. Shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets I couldn't quite understand. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and I wondered if it was all just a trick of the mind or something far more sinister, lurking just beyond my sight. I took my medicine and stepped out the door, ready to face the day, only to find that the world had crumbled around me. The end of the hall was gone, replaced by gaping holes and debris. Panic surged through me, and I turned back, hoping to return to my room, but it too lay in ruins, reduced to splintered wood and broken glass. Just seconds ago, everything had been fine. Desperation clawed at my throat as I sprinted down the street, aiming for the hospital, praying they could help me. But when I arrived, I found only a barren wasteland where the hospital had stood, replaced by twisted metal and crumbled concrete. Then I heard it, a muffled noise emerging from the rubble. I rushed toward it, my heart racing, thinking maybe someone was trapped beneath the wreckage. I began to dig, my hands scraping against sharp edges until I uncovered a small box. A voice seeped from it, speaking a language I couldn't comprehend. Overcome with dread, I dropped the box and hurried back toward the hotel. But nothing remained. The sky loomed heavy with dust, obscuring the sun's feeble attempts to break through. I sank to my knees in front of the shattered inn, breathing slowly, desperately convincing myself this was just another hallucination, a cruel trick of my mind. As I counted in my head, a sinister sound of stone grinding against stone broke the silence, followed by the distinct thud of something heavy tumbling down. I lifted my head, dread pooling in my stomach, and gazed at the ruined building across from me. My breath hitched as I saw a hand clawing its way out of the debris. I staggered to my feet, my vision blurred by the dusty haze, and crept closer, heart pounding. As I approached, more stones shifted beside me, revealing another hand, this one much closer. I squinted, wanting to confirm the nightmare unfolding before me. The hand emerging from the wreckage was smooth and dark, fingers curling as if beckoning me to join them. Arms were reaching up from the piles, pulling their owners from the shadows. Panic overtook me, and I turned and fled down the street, heart racing, desperate for escape. I found a small alcove and squeezed inside, hoping it would shield me from whatever horrors were approaching. As I shrank down and closed my eyes, I wished to be invisible, to be forgotten. I waited, trembling, until the sound of footsteps faded. Once the coast seemed clear, I darted out of the alcove and raced back toward the inn. I needed my medicine, needed the comfort of what little sanity I had left. I climbed up to what remained of my room, crawling under the bed as if it could protect me from the world above. I repeated to myself that this was all in my head, that none of it was real. But I could hear dozens of footsteps outside, kicking stones as they drew nearer to the inn. They had found me. I told myself it was all in my mind, that these shadows were just figments of my imagination. I needed to stop writing, to fall asleep. They couldn't get me while I was dreaming. When I awoke, Dr. Frank would be there to help me again. That was the last entry. I don't know what happened to the man who wrote it. Maybe he went mad, or perhaps it was a sick joke left by a previous occupant. But the more I pondered it, the more questions clawed at my mind. Whoever wrote this had definitely stayed in the room. The details were too precise. And the mention of Frank made my skin crawl. Was it the same man who had given me a ride into town? I was left with no options, no car, and it was the middle of the night. There was nothing I could do but sleep. Tomorrow, I would head to the garage to check on my car. The tow truck driver had promised it would be ready, and though he had invited me for dinner, all I wanted was to get my car fixed and escape this waking nightmare.